Maggie Brown felt her heart drop the moment her 8-year-old granddaughter rolled her eyes across the birthday table. She didn't expect the words that followed, sharp enough to cut through the music and chatter around them. "You can't sit with us," the child announced. "Mom said you're an old burden." Around the table, laughter broke out, light, careless, and cruel. Even her son Adam chuckled as if it were the most harmless joke in the world. Maggie stared at them, her face calm but her chest trembling inside her navy dress. "Well," she said softly, placing her napkin on the table, "I won't trouble anyone with my presence." As she walked out of the restaurant, Maggie wondered how the people she loved most had learned to treat her so lightly. She had paid their bills for 2 years, covered their emergencies, and carried their worries as if they were her own. Yet here she was, dismissed like an outsider. The cold evening air met her as she stepped outside, cooling her cheeks. "Old burden," she whispered, shaking her head. Her husband, Frank, had passed 3 years earlier, and she often feared loneliness. She never imagined betrayal from her own family would hurt far deeper. The drive home was quiet, giving her mind space to replay every sign she'd ignored. That night, just before midnight, her phone buzzed. Adam's message flashed across the screen as if nothing had happened. "Payment still due tomorrow. Jessica wants to confirm the transfer before the bank closes." No apology. No mention of the insult. No sense of shame. Maggie stared at the message for a long time, her jaw tightening. Then she typed the simplest answer she had ever written: "Figure it out." She turned off her phone, climbed into bed, and felt a surprising calm wash over her. Saying no felt like closing a door she should have shut long ago, and for the first time in months, she slept peacefully. Morning sunlight filtered into her kitchen as she made coffee, enjoying the smell of rich Sumatran roast rising from her mug. Her cat, Whiskers, rubbed against her feet, completely unaware that Maggie's whole world had shifted overnight. When she finally turned her phone back on, the screen lit up like fireworks, 17 missed calls and 43 messages. "Mom, please call back," one read. "There's been a huge misunderstanding," another insisted. Then the dramatic one, "Grandma, I'm sorry." Clearly typed by Jessica. Maggie chuckled lightly, spreading strawberry jam across her toast. It was amazing how fast panic grew when the money stopped flowing. By 9:15 a.m., her doorbell rang. Adam stood on the porch, looking like a teenager caught stealing cookies, not a grown man in his 40s. "Morning, sweetheart," Maggie said cheerfully as she opened the door. "You're up early." He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, glancing around as if expecting her to apologize. "Mom, what's going on? You didn't send the mortgage payment." Maggie nodded. "Correct." His eyebrows shot up. "It's due today. You've been paying it for 2 years." She sat calmly in her armchair. 24 payments. $48,000. "And yet somehow, I am still your burden." His face reddened as he realized she wasn't bending this time. Adam ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room like a man walking on hot coals. "Mom, you're overreacting. One silly comment from a child and now you're blowing up the whole family." Maggie looked at him calmly, her fingers resting on the armrest. "It wasn't a silly comment, Adam. It was something she learned at home." His mouth opened, but she continued before he could speak. "And last night made one thing very clear: you don't see me as family. You see me as a walking bank." His face tightened in frustration as he tried to regain control of the conversation. "Maggie, please," he said, softening his tone. "We can talk about last night later. Right now, I need you to call the bank." She let out a quiet breath, surprised at how steady she felt. "Adam, I won't be making any more payments for you. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever." He blinked, stunned. "You can't just stop. We'll lose the house." Maggie leaned forward slightly. "Then perhaps you should have thought about that before laughing when your daughter called me a burden." Adam swallowed hard, the consequences finally settling onto his shoulders like a heavy coat he didn't want to wear. He tried everything, pleading, bargaining, even guilt. "Mom, Jessica will apologize. We'll fix this. Just help us one more time." But the old Maggie, the soft-hearted woman who rescued everyone, was gone. The new Maggie met his desperation with quiet resolve. "Respect isn't a bargaining chip," she said. "It's a way of living." Adam stared at her, losing the argument he'd always won before. After a long silence, he finally whispered, "I don't know how we're going to keep up." Maggie stood up, smoothing her navy dress. "Then it's time you learned how to stand on your own 2 feet." When he left the house, slamming the door behind him, Maggie exhaled slowly and sat back down. Her hands trembled just slightly, not from fear, but from relief. Cutting the financial cord gave her a strength she hadn't felt since Frank was alive. She pulled out her planner and wrote down a reminder: call Martha, 10 a.m. tomorrow. If she was closing the bank of Maggie, she wanted a full evaluation of her finances. As she sipped her coffee, she allowed herself a small smile. Sometimes the bravest word in the world was the smallest one: no. By noon, Jessica arrived at Maggie's door, mascara smudged and voice trembling. "Maggie, please, can we talk?" she asked, hands wringing nervously. Maggie stepped aside politely, guiding her to the living room. Jessica sat on the edge of the sofa, rehearsed tears falling. The kids will suffer if you don't help us. We're already behind. We need you." Maggie poured 2 cups of tea and placed one in front of her. "Jessica," she said gently, "respect is not optional. You cannot insult me one night and demand money the next." Jessica's tears slowed as she realized this wasn't going the way she planned. Jessica wiped her eyes and leaned closer as if trying to pull sympathy out of the air. "Maggie, we can change. I swear we can. Please don't punish the children because of us." But Maggie stayed steady, holding her teacup with both hands. "I'm not punishing anyone," she replied. "I'm stepping out of a role I never should have played. You and Adam are adults. You must handle your own home." Jessica froze, her expression shifting from sorrow to irritation. "So that's it? You're just done helping?" Maggie nodded. "I'm done being mistreated in exchange for money." Later that evening, Maggie received a call from Tyler, her 12-year-old grandson. His young voice cracked with worry. "Grandma, Mom said we might lose the house. Are we really going to be homeless?" Maggie's heart softened, but her resolve did not waver. "Sweetheart, that is not your responsibility. It's your parents' job to take care of you." Tyler hesitated. "But you always fix things." Maggie closed her eyes, steadying her voice. "Not this time, honey. Some problems adults create must be solved by adults. You focus on being a child. That's all you need to do right now." 31 days later, Tyler texted again, this time with a photo of a foreclosure notice taped to their front door. Maggie sat in her garden when she opened it, surrounded by roses Frank had planted years ago. The bright petals almost mocked the sadness in the message. "Grandma, what do we do now?" he wrote. Maggie hurt for the children, but she knew this moment had been coming from the day Adam started using her instead of respecting her. She texted back gently, "Your parents will figure something out. You don't need to worry." But deep down, she knew they wouldn't. Soon came the guilt campaign. Jessica left long voicemails, wailing about the children's suffering. Adam stopped by unannounced, trying to corner Maggie into giving in. Even neighbors, misinformed by dramatic stories, suggested she should keep the family together. Maggie responded the same way each time: money is not the issue. Respect is. But the pressure grew heavier each day. Still, she stood her ground, realizing this was the first real boundary she had ever held. Frank would have been proud, she thought. He had always told her, "Maggie, kindness must have a backbone or it becomes weakness." By the 4th week, things escalated further. Chloe's teacher called, gently asking whether Maggie could help for the children's sake. Apparently, Chloe had told everyone her grandmother was letting the family become homeless. Maggie listened politely, then explained, their parents earn enough to manage their home. They simply made choices that caught up with them. The teacher apologized, embarrassed by the misunderstanding. But Maggie felt the weight of how deeply Jessica and Adam were willing to manipulate truth, even through a child. It was becoming clear that this battle was not about money anymore. It was about control. The true shock came when Maggie received a phone call from an attorney. "Mrs. Brown, I'm Robert Hayes. I represent your son in a conservatorship petition." Maggie sat up straighter. "Conservatorship?" she repeated. "Your son believes you're no longer capable of making sound financial decisions," the lawyer continued. "He is requesting legal control of your assets." Maggie nearly burst out laughing. The same son who begged for money now wanted ownership of it? Mr. Hayes, she replied calmly, my mind is sharp enough to see what this is, a power grab. But the paperwork was already filed. A court date was set. The next morning, Maggie walked into the law office of attorney Sarah Blackwood, a woman known for protecting seniors from financial abuse. Sarah listened carefully as Maggie explained every detail, from the insult at dinner to the foreclosure notice. When she finished, Sarah leaned forward. Mrs. Brown, this is classic elder financial abuse. They are targeting your assets, not your well-being. Maggie swallowed hard. Can he win? Sarah shook her head. Only if we do nothing. But we're not doing nothing. Maggie felt a flicker of confidence. For the first time in years, someone was fighting for her instead of against her. The court hearing arrived on a crisp Thursday morning. Maggie wore her best gray suit and carried a folder of financial records, medical reports, and a written statement. Adam and Jessica sat across the aisle, whispering urgently. Their lawyer painted Maggie as confused, forgetful, and irrational. But Sarah countered with evidence of perfect medical evaluations and 40 pages of documented financial manipulation. Then came the recordings, Adam demanding money, Jessica calling Maggie an old bat, and their plans to control her accounts. The judge's expression hardened as she listened. Maggie watched Adam shift uncomfortably, his confidence dissolving like sugar in hot tea. When the judge finally ruled, her voice carried clear authority. Petition denied. I see no evidence of diminished capacity. I do, however, see concerning signs of attempted financial exploitation. She ordered an investigation into Adam and Jessica's behavior. The gavel echoed across the courtroom, sealing the decision. Outside, Sarah placed a reassuring hand on Maggie's shoulder. You did incredibly well, she said. Most people would have broken under that pressure. Maggie exhaled a long breath she didn't know she'd been holding. I'm tired, she whispered. But I'm not done yet. The tide had turned, but the storm wasn't finished. 3 weeks later, Maggie learned that Adam and Jessica had packed a U-Haul and were planning to flee the state. Worse, they intended to leave Tyler and Chloe behind temporarily, assuming Maggie would take them in. Adam called her, desperate and breathless. Mom, it's just until we settle. You can handle the kids, you always do. Maggie stared out her window at the 2 frightened children sitting on the steps across the street. Adam, she said firmly, you will not abandon your children with me because of your own choices. Jessica later arrived in tears, but Maggie held strong. The children needed real parents, not escape artists. As the U-Haul filled with furniture, Maggie realized Adam and Jessica were determined to leave the children behind. She watched from her living room window as Tyler held a small suitcase and Chloe clutched a stuffed bear, their faces pale with confusion. Maggie stepped outside and called Adam's phone. If you drive away without your children, she said, her voice steady, I will call Child Protective Services. Adam froze beside the truck. Mom, don't do this. You are doing it, she corrected. I'm only responding. Jessica's eyes narrowed with frustration, but neither parent slowed their packing. At noon, when it became clear they were leaving regardless, Maggie made the call she never thought she would dial. 2 CPS workers arrived within the hour, approaching Adam and Jessica with official documents in hand. The street grew quiet except for the sound of pages flipping and voices tightening. Tyler and Chloe stood behind the social workers, looking both relieved and scared. The CPS supervisor turned to Maggie. Mrs. Brown, thank you for reporting this. You likely prevented a serious abandonment case. Maggie nodded, though her heart ached. Watching her own son avoid his children's eyes hurt worse than any insult. After hours of back and forth, CPS presented a clear choice: take the children to Arizona immediately or surrender them into emergency foster care. Jessica whispered furiously to Adam, but neither stepped forward to claim responsibility. We can't take them right now, Jessica finally muttered. The decision settled like dust in the air, coating everything with disappointment. The children were placed with the Morrison family, longtime foster parents who lived nearby. As the U-Haul pulled away, Maggie watched Adam and Jessica leave without saying goodbye to their own kids. The quiet that followed felt heavy, like a door closing forever. Maggie spent the evening sitting in her garden, listening to the wind move through Frank's old roses. She wondered if she had made the right decision or if she should have stepped in earlier. But each time doubt rose, she remembered how Chloe had learned to call her a burden, how Adam laughed, how Jessica manipulated everyone around her. These children had lived in chaos long before today. Maggie did not break that home. She simply stopped holding it together with her money. She whispered into the night, they deserved better than the parents they got. 2 months later, Maggie received unexpected news from CPS. Adam and Jessica had been arrested in another state with stolen construction equipment in their vehicle. The charges were severe: theft, fraud, and transport of stolen goods. The caseworker explained gently, "Mrs. Brown, your son is involved in a much larger criminal ring. The investigation is ongoing." Maggie felt her stomach twist. She had known Adam was irresponsible, but crime? Organized theft? It was almost too much to process. She sat down slowly. "And the children?" she asked. "They're doing well," the caseworker replied. "Better than anyone expected." When Maggie visited the Morrison home that weekend, Tyler ran to her with new confidence in his step. "Grandma Maggie. Look, I got an A on my math test." Chloe held up a drawing of a garden filled with flowers that looked suspiciously like Maggie's roses. Inside the house, there was peace, real peace. No shouting, no tension, no whispers about bills. As they played board games, Tyler suddenly said, "Grandma, it's quiet here. Not scary quiet like home used to be. Just nice." Maggie swallowed a lump in her throat. The children weren't just surviving, they were healing. That night, after the visit, Maggie called her attorney Sarah and said, "I want custody." Sarah took a deep breath. "Maggie, this isn't temporary. This means school schedules, doctor visits, teenage years, everything." Maggie stared at her empty hallway, imagining backpacks hanging on hooks again and kids laughing in the kitchen. "I know," she said. "And I'm ready." Sarah smiled through the phone. "Then let's prepare your petition. You're doing something brave, Maggie. And something good." Maggie felt a warmth in her chest she hadn't felt in years. Purpose, steady and strong. The custody hearing took place in December. Maggie arrived with letters from teachers, neighbors, and even the Morrison family, all praising her commitment to Tyler and Chloe. The children sat proudly beside her, dressed in their best clothes. When the judge asked why they wanted to live with Maggie, Chloe spoke first. "She makes me feel safe," she said softly. Tyler nodded. "She doesn't yell about money. She just listens and helps us." Adam and Jessica were not present. In jail, they had already signed papers surrendering parental rights. Their absence filled the courtroom with a strange, painful silence. Judge Wells reviewed the documents, her expression thoughtful. Then she looked directly at Maggie. "Mrs. Brown, are you prepared for the full responsibility of raising these children at your age?" Maggie straightened her shoulders. "Your Honor, I raised 1 child already. I can raise 2 more, with better judgment this time." A soft chuckle spread through the room. Moments later, the judge declared, "Permanent custody is granted to Margaret Brown." Tyler exhaled in relief. Chloe burst into tears of joy. Maggie held them both tightly, whispering, "You're safe now. You're home." The first few weeks in Maggie's home were busy but joyful. Tyler chose the bigger spare bedroom and filled it with science books and posters. Chloe picked the sunny room facing the garden and covered it with drawings. Maggie relearned the rhythm of school mornings, packing lunches, signing homework, reminding Tyler about socks and Chloe about brushing her hair. The house buzzed with life again. One night, as they decorated the Christmas tree, Chloe looked up and asked shyly, "Grandma Maggie, can we call you Mom?" Maggie felt her eyes sting. "If that makes your heart feel safe," she whispered, "then yes, sweetheart. You can." As months passed, Maggie settled into her new life with Tyler and Chloe, and the children flourished under her steady care. Tyler joined the school science club, winning a small award that made Maggie beam with pride. Chloe began piano lessons and practiced every evening, filling the house with soft music that reminded Maggie of quieter, sweeter times. One evening, while Maggie cooked dinner, Tyler approached her hesitantly. "Mom Maggie," he said, using the name more often now, "do you think Dad will change someday?" Maggie paused at the stove, considering her answer carefully. "Change is possible," she said, "but only when someone truly wants it." In February, 2 letters arrived, one from Jessica and one from Adam. Jessica's letter was filled with apologies and promises of transformation, though the tone felt familiar and rehearsed. Adam's letter was different, sharp and bitter, blaming Maggie for everything: his arrest, his marriage, his lost home. When Maggie showed the letters to her attorney Sarah, the advice was firm. "Do not respond," Sarah said. "Sometimes silence protects more than words." That night, Maggie burned both letters in her fireplace, watching the flames curl around the paper. It felt like closing another chapter, one that had already caused too much pain. But the family's challenges weren't over. One morning, Maggie received a call from a detective investigating Adam's criminal network. The detective explained that Adam had been trying to implicate her in the theft ring, claiming she had helped launder money through the monthly mortgage payments. Maggie felt her knees weaken. "He what?" she whispered. The detective reassured her. "We know the truth, Mrs. Brown. You're not under investigation. But you will likely be called to testify." Maggie steadied herself, gripping the edge of the counter. The son she once rocked to sleep was now trying to save himself by destroying her. It was a wound deeper than any insult. For weeks, Maggie prepared for the federal trial with the help of Sarah and the prosecutors. She gathered bank statements, phone records, and evidence that she had cut off payments long before Adam's arrest. Tyler also stepped forward bravely. "I heard Dad talking to some men once," he told Maggie. "They were planning things. Not good things." Maggie hugged him tightly. "You don't have to testify if it's too hard," she said, but Tyler shook his head. "I want to tell the truth." His courage made her realize that the cycle of silence and fear Adam created was finally breaking. The day of the trial arrived. Maggie sat in the courtroom wearing her charcoal suit, her hands steady despite the storm inside her. Adam glanced at her from the defense table, his expression unreadable. When Maggie was called to the stand, she spoke clearly and honestly, explaining every payment she made, every lie she believed, and every step she took to protect her grandchildren. Adam's attorney tried to twist her words, but the truth stood firm. Then Tyler testified, his young voice echoing across the room. "I heard my dad planning to steal things," he said. "Mom told me not to say anything." When the jury returned, the verdict was swift: guilty on all counts. Adam was sentenced to 15 years, Jessica to 12. The judge noted Adam's attempt to blame his mother as a sign of deep moral failure. Maggie sat silently as the gavel fell, staring at the table instead of her son. There was no joy in seeing him taken away, only a quiet acceptance that some endings are necessary for new beginnings to grow. Outside the courthouse, Tyler wrapped his arms around her. "Mom, Maggie," he whispered, "we're safe now." Maggie nodded, letting a tear slip down her cheek. "Yes, sweetheart. We are." Months later, investigators discovered something unexpected. Adam had hidden more than $1 million in secret accounts using Maggie's identity. The prosecutor explained that Maggie was legally entitled to claim restitution for the identity theft. She chose to take half of it and place the entire amount into college funds for Tyler and Chloe. The other half she directed to Adam's elderly victims, people who had trusted him and suffered for it. It was Maggie's quiet way of repairing the harm her son caused. Frank would be proud of this, she thought, feeling his memory settle warmly over her shoulders. Life settled into a peaceful rhythm. Maggie attended school concerts, helped with homework, and filled her home with small traditions that made the children feel rooted again. They planted new roses in Frank's garden, one pink for Chloe, one red for Tyler, and one white for Maggie. On weekends, they cooked together, laughing as flour dusted the countertops. The house no longer felt empty or echoing. It felt alive, bright, and safe. One Saturday morning, Chloe looked at Maggie and said, "Mom, Maggie, our home feels like a happy story now." Maggie hugged her tightly. "That's because we're writing it together." Still, there were quiet nights when Maggie sat alone in her garden, thinking about Adam. It was impossible to forget he was her son. She remembered his childhood smile, his scraped knees, the time he cried over a failed math test. Somewhere along the way, he had stepped off the path she hoped he would follow. "I lost a son," she whispered once, "but I gained 2 children who truly needed me." She didn't know if forgiveness would ever come, but she understood that healing wasn't about erasing the past, it was about building a better future. On the 1-year anniversary of gaining custody, Maggie hosted a small celebration in the backyard. Tyler carried out a cake he proudly baked himself, and Chloe placed handmade decorations across the fence. As the sun dipped low, the three of them sat under the oak tree Frank had planted decades earlier. Chloe leaned against Maggie's shoulder. "Mom Maggie," she said softly, "thanks for choosing us." Maggie kissed the top of her head. "No, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice full of quiet strength. "You two saved me just as much as I saved you." The garden lights flickered on, and for the first time in a long time, Maggie felt whole, surrounded by love, protected by peace, and ready for whatever tomorrow would bring.